Each day in the hospital brought a dizzying array of personnel, medications, tests, scans, side effects, cautions, and complications. While I received excellent care, it was an overwhelming initiation into cancer treatment that left me feeling highly vulnerable and utterly dependent on the care of strangers. The best way I could make sense out of it was to write about it. Writing required me to take the chaotic threads of my daily experience and weave them into a coherent narrative. When there was very little I could control, composing these reports became a psychic survival mechanism. They made me the author of my own life. I got great support from my correspondents, including 2 suggestions that I turn these ramblings into a book. I initially thought that was crazy, but one thing led to another and my memoir appeared in December 2018. You're invited to visit my virtual booth here at the conference and you can learn more about it. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. The book contains 65 lightly edited emails, a lengthy preface, and a brief epilogue. Along the way, I read The Wounded Storyteller by the Canadian sociologist Arthur Frank. He gave me new insight into why telling my story was so beneficial for me. Frank explains that storytelling by ill persons shifts us from a passive to an active role in our illness. Doctors may ensure our survival, but telling our story maintains our identity. As we surrender our bodies to medicine, we retain ourselves by telling our story. Frank describes 3 types of stories. Chaos stories lack any narrative order or coherent sequence, and they carry no expectation of recovery or illusion of control. They're not told as much as experienced by ill persons as overwhelming, but they must be honored for healing to begin. This sounded familiar. My surprising diagnosis and my wife's simultaneous surgery certainly felt chaotic. To top it off, 2 weeks later, neighbors emailed photos of our 2 60-foot trees that had come down in a nasty thunderstorm, damaging the roof, deck, and gutters of our unoccupied home. Chaos story indeed. Restitution stories say, I was healthy, then I was sick, now I am becoming healthy again. In these accounts, the patient's body is analogous to a broken down car, the physician is an able mechanic, and the patient is a passive bystander drinking bad coffee in the shop's waiting room. All patients hope to tell a restitution story, but they feature a physician's active intervention that restores the sick body of a passive patient sidelined by technical expertise. My earliest email reports were restitution stories, documenting the medical interventions I underwent, but my doctors were the lead actors in this drama. Quest stories are the only ones in which the teller assumes center stage. Here, the patient accepts their illness and uses it, believing that something is to be gained from the experience. Here, people derive new meanings from telling their illness. In quest stories, people become not just survivors, but witnesses with a responsibility to share their stories. Doing so fosters a quiet courage that sustains survivors facing an unknowable future. As I recovered, I realized my later emails had become a quest story. That quest has continued in everything I've written since, and that includes this talk. Could I have the next slide, please? Oh, Sasha, she's a troublemaker. Thank you. There are many ways to tell our stories. Expressive writing about emotions in a journal is most familiar. This is a free writing process that spontaneously captures immediate experience. It should flow without the critical eye that accompanies writing for others. At various times in my life, I've done journal writing, but it always seemed solipsistic. Why should I write all this stuff if I'm the only person who will read it? Won't I remember what I wrote? Well, we often don't remember what we wrote, so a journal can rekindle our past in striking ways. But there's more to it. The best description of expressive writing I've heard came from a social worker in a support group. She said that emotions are stored in a part of our brain that is relatively inaccessible, making them difficult to process. Putting them into words moves them to the part of our brain that deals in language. That makes them easier to resolve. I can't judge the literal accuracy of this claim, but even as a metaphor, it's striking. It resonates with my longstanding belief that putting subjective experiences in writing gives them an objective existence. We can revisit them when we wish, but it frees us from constantly obsessing about them. This helped me appreciate expressive writing, but it didn't fully explain why my narrative was so meaningful to me. Then I realized that my writing was about making sense of a novel, disorienting experience. It was less about emotional processing and more about cognitive comprehension. It may be my training as a social scientist that makes me curious about how things work. But when I can understand something, even something bad, I can usually come to terms with it. That's why my own chaos, restitution, and quest stories were so healing for me. But I didn't make sense in a vacuum. The fact that I was writing for an audience drove this cognitive comprehension. I could convey my story to others only by understanding it more clearly myself. Without writing for others, I doubt I would have reached the same insights. And I will conclude with some practical examples of the value of writing. For several years, I participated in the WISE project. It stands for Writing for Insight, Strength, and Ease. The goal is to solicit writing by transplant survivors addressed to current transplant patients. The stories will be tagged and posted on our website for easy access. This project built on research comparing different types of writing by transplant survivors. The study compared 4 groups: those who did expressive writing, those who did peer helping writing by offering advice and encouragement to current patients, those who did neutral writing, or just the facts, and those who did a sequence of expressive writing followed by peer helping writing. The only group that showed consistent measurable benefits was the last one, where people processed their own experience through expressive writing and then did peer helping writing to support others. People in this group showed significantly reduced psychological distress and improved physical symptoms and quality of life. My own interpretation is that peer helping writing repositions the author as someone who's gained valuable insight they can offer to others. That is inherently empowering, but it depends on first processing one's own experience and only then writing for others. The overall process resembles a quest story, as survivors gain new insight through telling their stories and readers benefit from their advice. A final example. I've taught this writing sequence several times in a workshop at Gilda's Club in the Twin Cities. Over several meetings, people do expressive writing, followed by peer helping writing about their cancer journey. People find the sessions helpful even if they have no prior writing experience, and the audience for this exercise is purely hypothetical. The first time I offered this workshop, I had to provide the title quickly for an online schedule of classes. I hastily named it Writing Through Cancer, a writing workshop series. I've come to like the title's double meaning. Writing through cancer can refer to duration, as in narrating a cancer journey from the beginning to the present, but writing through cancer also implies transcendence, as in going above and beyond illness and retaining our identity through the power of storytelling. I think Arthur Frank would approve. Next slide. There she is again. And the final slide just has some resources to contact me. The full title of my memoir is there, my website is there, Facebook page, email address, and the address for Gilda's Club of the Twin Cities. I'm delighted to hear from people in this session, and afterwards by email. Feel free to get in touch, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve, for sharing these beautiful insights with us. For the record, I do not mind being confused with beautiful Sasha the kitten when people do search the internet for our shared name, and I am so honored to have been part of your care. Thank you very much. Now let's hear from Joe, aka Jojo Tough. And if you could play the video for us, Teresa. That's okay. I will make sure that this video is available to everyone at the close of the session if we aren't able to play it here today. Joe, can you tell us a little bit about your story? And you'll have to unmute your microphone again. My apologies.
You guys hear me? Can you hear me? No.
Yes.
Can you? Yep. All right. I was diagnosed at 35 in 2017 on January 15th. So actually it's coming up here, my 5-year mark this coming June. I was admitted to Methodist Hospital in 2017. and I did almost a month and a half, 2 months over there with an amazing team down there. I was 35 years old, and I actually, make a long story short, I went from Methodist Hospital for 2 months and was taken care of, did all my chemo down there, and then got transferred to the U of M because I did my first bone marrow biopsy or bone marrow transplant with my brother. Cool story. Actually, I have both my siblings at 100%, which is super rare. And I'm a middle child of the three, and all three of us matched at 100%. So we went with my brother first on September 27th at the U of M, and the U of M was open doors as well, just like Methodist was. And on September 27th, we did my first bone marrow transplant. Went really well. Was cancer-free by December 6th of 2017. And then it decided to come back. First, it came back in spring of 2018, and where I ended up doing a new treatment back at the U of M. I was there for almost 30 days. And we did something called intuzumab, and that was a treatment, and that went really well. And then I beat cancer in the summer of 2018. And 4 months later, it decided to come back aggressive, where I had a golf ball size tumor pushing on my brain in the late fall of 2018, and a tumor in my neck, where we did radiation, target radiation to shrink it, and it went really well. And at the U of M, and at the radiation team down there is amazing as well. And then we did steroids to help get rid of the tumor in my neck. And then I was on Blincyto, another treatment, and that went really well. And then I was cancer-free in January of 2019. And then I was in my longest streak. Hold on. No, not yet. Sorry, now this is round 4. And I was cancer-free by spring of 2019, and then decided to come back after July. And I had actually had a tumor in my brain that was pushing on my vocabulary, and I had radiation done. At that point, I've done all the treatments, and we were running out of options. So the U of M and Dr. Holt and her team searched around, and we ended up out in Seattle, Washington, for a new treatment called the CAR T cell therapy. And thank God we have family out there, so we spent some time with them, and then ventured into the city and stayed at the U of M or UW hospital over there. And with the CAR Ts, where they took your own cells out, remodified them, and put them back into me. And that was in the fall of 2020, or of 2019. I'm sorry, 2019. And that was round 4. And then I was in my longest streak coming in 2020. I literally left right before COVID hit, which was like crazy. And so we came back by January, and I did my second bone marrow transplant with my sister, and that went really well. And that was on February 19th of 20, because we just turned 2 this past, so yeah, 2 years ago. And so I was in my longest streak, and then it decided to come back around fall, or actually in August of 2020. And I ended up doing the CAR T again, but here at the U of M. And we basically did a different version of the CAR T. And so we took an identified donor, and then they remodified his cells and then put them into me. And then I'm in my longest of 1 year and 4 months, like Sasha was saying, of remission. So we're keeping that W, as you see, the W flag, going strong and mighty. And I'm on my verge of working on my own foundation, which I'm hoping to get that started up and going by the summer. And I'm working on my memoir as well, I started 3 years ago, and it's been called The Life of JoJo Tough. And hopefully get that published in the next year or two. And then also with that support group, like the community coffee cancer conversation that will be held over at the Living World Church in Brooklyn Park, which once I get that all set up, I'll make an announcement too as well. So, and as you know, caretakers are the best. So that's my best picture of my mom. And we've been a team ever since. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Joe, for your inspiring words and for sharing your incredible journey with us.
Thank you.
Your resilience, yes, your resilience through.
You just gotta keep pulling your pants up and keep moving on.
Yes, yes. At one point, you had shared this quote with me, and it was so powerful and so moving that I included it in the presentation today. And you had stated, it doesn't matter how many people you have in your corner to support you. Those 4 or 4,000 people are always going to be rooting you on.
Oh,
You'll
for
get
sure.
you past the finish line time and again.
Yes, that's very true. And you just gotta take it like a grain of salt and enjoy the roller coaster.
Just incredible. Thank you, Joe.
Joe, you have to stop having
Thank you.
cancer so you can finish the book, okay?
Yes, sir. That's my goal. I'm trying to get that out there. I'm done with 5 times. That's it.
Absolutely fair. Next slide. Now we will hear from Jennifer Byers. Jennifer, what would you like to share with us today?
I would like to share some of the resources that people can find at Be the Match, because we really do understand that survivorship is so complicated because it is so personalized. And often folks are leaving transplant centers and going back to physicians who may or may not have experience with transplant medicine. And we really want to build up our services for survivorship patients. So let me tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. Next slide. So I think this slide, everyone here knows what survivorship is. So we can just go right to the next slide. So first of all, Be the Match. If you're not familiar, we're also the National Marrow Donor Program, and we have a lot of patient services, all of which are free. And we also have services for caregivers and providers. And we really just want folks to have the best quality of life that they can. Next slide. So if you're not already familiar with our patient support center, our survivorship program is under this umbrella of our patient support center. These are just some of the things that we offer. We do have free counseling, which has been so helpful. People have said to me, you know, I have a therapist, but my therapist isn't in transplant medicine or hasn't gone through this. So going to a counselor who really is in this realm was so helpful for me. We have Peer Connect, so you can try to find folks who are going through similar things. Steve, I think you mentioned maybe that you've been involved in the Peer Connect program. We do have fantastic volunteers who work with Be the Match. They're survivors, so they work either with their peers or they're doing advocacy work to improve legislation that will support patients. We have survivorship chats where folks can come together to discuss issues that impact them. That might be about GVHD or stress or reproductive health, you know, really relevant topics. We do have an amazing clinical trials search and support team. So helping folks navigate that whole system. And then we also have some ways for you to talk to your donor if you haven't already. And grants, I should mention as well. We help folks a lot with navigating all of those expenses that come up. So we do have some programs that can help with that. And we have a navigator who specializes in insurance as well. So if you're just having some issues with insurance, we can help you navigate that. Next slide. So specific to survivorship, we do have some fantastic materials. I noticed these are posted on this conference's website under Be the Match. If you go to our booth, we do have digitally the 6 and 12 month after transplant care guidelines. And those really list out some things that you want to be tracking for yourself and or sharing with your doctor if they're not already aware. We do have, I believe, also on this conference's website, the GVHD fact sheet for people who are struggling with GVHD. We have a newsletter series called the Living Now series that's specific to survivorship and is timed along with what is a typical, if that can even be said, of a survivorship journey. Kind of that timing so that as things might be coming up for patients, that's going to be the topics that are coming up in the Living Now newsletter. And we're actually working on getting those into a digital format so that you can have them via email. We also have a My Be the Match app, which is a phone app that you can use that will help you track medications, track your well-being, kind of keep things in one place for when you go to your doctor. And we've actually found the biggest response to this program, which is brand new, has come from providers who are struggling themselves for helping their patients. And we do have the provider care lines that provider care guides. They are being updated. They were last published in 2019, so things have been changed, and Be the Match is working with ASTCT to update those. But in the meantime, we have either electronic or hard copies that we can give to you or send directly to your provider that can really give them some helpful information. Next slide. This is just an image of the cover there of the long-term guidelines for providers. Next slide. So our team is small but mighty this time. I'm the patient coordinator, so I'm kind of the person you would meet when you come to the front door. And I just want to listen to your story and offer you what the many resources that we have. We also do have a nurse practitioner, and this is probably the most exciting part of our program. Of course, our nurse practitioner cannot offer medical advice. She's not there to do that. She's going to turn you back to your doctor, but she is going to be able to sit with you and help figure out, like, what are the questions you need to ask? These are the things you're going through. Can you go to your doctor who probably has such a short time to see you with kind of a plan so that you know what you're asking and can communicate clearly, just get the very best care that you can get. Next slide. So this is just our contact information. Again, feel free to reach out and or go to our virtual booth where you can get more information about our services. If you're just not sure if we can help you, reach out anyway. We are not specific to anyone at any timing in their transplant journey. You could be 5 years out, you could be 1 year out. You can have any kind of transplant. It doesn't have to be the match facilitated transplant or an unrelated transplant. We want to help caregivers. We want to help providers. So at this time, we have the space to just say, we just want to be here and answer anything we can. So any questions you have, please feel free to reach out either now or later. That is me.
Next slide, please.
Oh,
Previous slide, one back. These are really great resources, Jennifer. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share these with our survivorship community. We did have a question that came up in the chat regarding GVHD, and that is graft versus host disease. If you would like more information on graft versus host disease, I actually recommend toggling over to the Be the Match website. There is really great patient resources on that site that are easy to read. I think it's great literature to consume as a patient or a caregiver in terms of how the pathology of those conditions are really described. Thank you, Jennifer. Next slide, please. At this time, we will use the remainder of the session to address questions from the audience in the Q&A box. I don't see any Q&A questions that have come up just yet. So if you've been waiting to submit those questions, if you could do so now, that would be wonderful. I do have one question for the group that I was able to think of as we were discussing today. And that is, what is the one thing that helped you find resilience when you needed it the most? And again, members of the panel, if you could unmute yourself to share, that would be wonderful.
I'd rather
Basically,
quickly,
my
go
fan
ahead,
base.
Joe.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, my fan base, that was, you know, that I'm not quitting for myself, I'm quitting for everyone. Hold on, let me reverse that. I'm not quitting, and my fan base basically was my reason not to quit, to keep moving forward. So that was my take.
Very good. Thank you, Joe. Yes, having those people that are just there for you at all times, you know, even if it's a virtual connection and they're not there holding your hand.
Right.
That feels really good to hear. Yeah. And Steve, how about you?
You know, I had raced through a number of coping strategies when I began my talk, but maybe as central as any was having learned just a few months before my diagnosis. I took a community education class on mindfulness and meditation and yoga, and I took it seriously. So for about 8 weeks, I just integrated that into my daily life. And when I landed in the hospital on 24 hours notice for 5 weeks, I said, I need this tool. And it applied to almost all the other coping strategies. I wanted to be as physically active as possible. I roamed the halls. I walked 5 miles a day, but I also did it very mindfully, always staying in the present moment, trying to be non-judgmental, accepting what I couldn't control. And I think in terms of keeping me centered, fighting off anxiety, just being in the moment and not letting my mind get ahead of me in terms of what could happen, because you don't know. And we tend to think of the worst scenarios. And I taught myself, if I'm doing the what ifs of all the bad things that can happen, the least I can do is do some positive what ifs. You know, neither one is more likely, and thinking about it doesn't make them more likely. But it's a much better way to pass the time if you think about how this could end well, as opposed to how it might end badly. And so mindfulness was probably the master strategy that enveloped all the others: writing, using humor, et cetera, et cetera. So if you force me to pick one, I guess that would be my choice. And yoga went along with that. I remember my first week in the hospital, I just didn't want to be defined and dominated by this disease. So I wanted to continue doing yoga, but I had to ask the nurses to get some longer tubing from my chemotherapy on the IV pole so I could still do the downward dog while receiving chemotherapy. And they did. And it was just my way of saying, I'm still going to do my yoga. I don't care how sick I am or what you're doing to me. I'm going to maintain my identity in this and lots of other ways.
That's awesome.
I love it, Steve. Yes. We did have a couple others share in the chat, family and friends being there. That was shared with us by Bruce Clark, so thank you. And then also making a simple list of the top 10 reasons why I know I could beat cancer and shared with my support team. So that was from Jim. Thank you for sharing that, Jim. Yes, sometimes the power of a simple list, your top 10 positives, why you're doing this. Absolutely. We had another comment, a grateful heart heals. Thank you, Dana. We have a question that did come in. How can we get this resource information to be on the TVs in the patients' rooms as an education category for patients to support everyone who's being admitted to the hospital right at their bedside? That is a really great question. And one to the, I think, greater universe of transplant and how we go about our treatment. As we know, virtual reality and the internet and resources like the TV, they've been at our hands and at our fingertips and right there with us in our treatment spaces for quite some time. How can we better utilize that to make sure that these resources are there when we need them? So really great question, not one I'm sure I have an answer to, but I would love to hear from the panel, their thoughts on this.
At Be the Match, we're always trying to, help providers know we're here because there's just so much for them to know. And we are just one of many organizations that can help their patients. We have developed a program where we reach out proactively to patients that are in the beginnings of their search. And one of the things that we're hoping to grow through this survivorship program is to make patient outreach to people at the appropriate time in their transplant journey. So it's not that moment where they are in the hospital and they're just inundated with information. It's when they do go back home and they get a package in the mail that has the information about our survivorship program. But learning to identify through our systems those people and their time is the challenge that we're running into. But we do plan to make that happen, and hopefully that can get the information just straight to the patient without having to put that burden on the provider as well.
Very nice. Thank you, Jennifer. Joe, we're having a difficult time hearing you. Can you speak a little bit louder?
Let me see if it. Oh, I was just trying to think how to integrate it into the hospital. On the TV monitors. I mean, they show about the U of M and all that, but having this now insight, that puts a new perspective, and people would like that information too as well. Maybe having like pamphlets in the hospital or in their on the TV, like having like a little info saying, hey, Be the Match, throw in the Be the Match in there, and then throw in whatever ideas while they're going through all the U of M info, but on the TV it's saying, hey, like whatever. But that's a tough one, but that's a good idea though.
Great feedback, Joe.
I can add, when I was undergoing treatment, people may have told me about Be the Match, but it didn't register and it didn't sink in. And it was only later that I discovered everything they have to offer, which is wonderful.
And I push it on people so hard, like Be the Match, like that's since day one when I found out about Be the Match. I'm all about you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of why I became part of the Peer Connect program was I wanted someone to talk to when I was going through it that had been there, and that didn't work out. But if I can be that for someone else, if I can be that person, I'm more than happy to do so. And it's one of the most fulfilling volunteer things that I do.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, great discussion. And I really appreciate you guys providing feedback on how helpful those resources were to you throughout your journey, and to Jennifer for providing us with more insight to our entire community that's joined us today on what these resources look like, and that they're not just geared towards our patients, but also our caregivers, right? The other half of this piece, right? And so really helpful. We had someone share in the chat that Carrying Bridge was also helpful for them, which was great to hear. And it looks like we have time for one last question. I did have one more question come through in the Q&A. And that was, how was your caregivers able to cope? Steve, you had shared some specific challenges with your wife. And what was that experience like for them? And how were you able to meet them where they were at the same time when you were undergoing treatment and coping with so much yourselves?
Yeah. Well, our experience hopefully was atypical. Sue spent 1 week in my induction hospital, the same first week that I was there, had surgery in the middle of that. And I remember just before the surgery, her sister wheeled Sue down from the 6th floor where she was to the 4th floor where I was. So she visited me in her wheelchair while I'm laying in my bed getting chemo. And we just kind of looked at each other and shrugged our shoulders like, what the hell is going on here? After surgery, she was discharged to a TCU for a month. So we did FaceTime and Skype and things like that, but we didn't see each other basically for a month, except that way. She arrived home 1 day before me. I arrived home, we opened the refrigerator and said, we got our work cut out for us. It was like a petri dish after we'd been gone for 5 weeks. So we cleaned out the refrigerator and tried to establish a normal life. So at that point, obviously we were sort of caregivers for each other. But in that critical period after transplant, I recruited what I call Team Wisconsin. I had my brother, an old college friend, and his wife. They came up on weekly rotations of duty and helped Sue and I out while I got through that first month and a half. So, and these are people I'd known for a long time. I wasn't especially close to them, but when I needed them, it's like they were right there and they did everything I needed and more. And I got better. And now we're going back to the way we were before. So it was like, I think of it almost like the way the immune system responds to a challenge. When the need is there, everything acted positively. And once I got better, life went back to more or less normal, with a whole new chapter to think about.
Yes, I think what you're speaking to is a beautiful adaptation. You guys were able to, handle these stressors and these challenges together and get through as a team, which is really quite beautiful. So thank you all for joining us for this special session. We have collectively enjoyed your thoughtful conversations and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, everyone. Please do reach out if we can help.
Thanks.
Bye.
You guys are awesome.
Thank you, Steve and Joe. You're amazing.
Thank you.
So is your company over there. I mean, I literally pushed, since being sick 5 years ago, I pushed Be the Match hardcore from here to Alaska.
Thank you. Bless your heart. Well, we're here for you too. Don't forget. But hopefully you won't need us.
I
You're
know.
like
Like I got my matches here locally, so which is great. But I know you guys are here. I'm 15 minutes away from you guys, so I know where you guys are at.
Awesome. All right. Stay well, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
You
thank
too,
you.
Jennifer.
Bye.
Bye, Steve. Bye, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.